It's 2023, and it's the day a lot of us have been waiting for months or even for years. The beta playtests we received were fun and built hype for this moment. Sure, there were some connection issues with desync, and sure, there were still some issues with the punching, but the base of the game was still really fun. And it looked like everything that we wanted was close to happening. And on January 31st, we were finally going to get our hands on the game that we've all wanted to play for so long. At this point, the hype for the game is at its all-time high. Steel City even did a pre-launch event that some of us, including me, tuned into during work. I remember getting home after having Steam download the game to my PC remotely, being excited to play the game for the very first time. This is the first time I've been this excited to play a game since Spider-Man PS4 came out. I remember the first moments opening the game and playing Ali vs. Frazier as my first fight for nostalgia purposes, because in every fight night that I ever owned as a kid, that was the first match that I always played. And in my first game of early access, I was thrilled because in that match, I could see the vision they were going for. I have a friend that's a PC gamer, and he has Undisputed on his wish list on Steam. And since he wasn't following the journey like I had been for the last 2.5 years, he wasn't super excited to buy it like I was. So he just told me, tell me when the game is worth purchasing. Was it there yet for someone that wasn't already invested into the game? No, but they had a lot to build on. I remember thinking that soon this game would be the game that we always wanted as a community. It only took a couple days online to realize a meta was developing, if you could even call it that. The step back straight was the bail me out of everything punch, and the body uppercut was becoming the most used punch because it was practically unblockable and unpunishable. Players who were desperate to get into the unimportant and now unimpressive Undisputed rank used this strategy, along with picking Sugar Ray Robinson in the lower weight classes or Ali and Fury in the heavyweight class to try to rack up wins and points. And if they were going to lose, all they did was disconnect intentionally so they can keep their record pristine. Slowly, the fun was leaving the online experience. The lack of damage and stamina balancing didn't help either. It will be revealed in the first few weeks of the game that being a spammer was rewarded and playing smart was punished. On top of all of that, being a runner was encouraged and fighting on the front foot was basically non-existent. At this point, it was still early in the year, but as annoying as all the corny gamers made the online experience, many of us still had hope. In my mind, there was no way Steel City, a company who stated their goal of making an authentic boxing experience, was going to let things continue like this for much longer. These things will be patched out soon, damage and stamina will get fixed, and we'll get back to the fun of them adding content as they update the gameplay and animations leading to a full launch. We're now in the middle of the year, and many of the gamers in the community have completely stopped playing the game because of the many issues. The patience of the people is starting to run out, and a lot of content creators have even stopped making videos about the game. Around this time, I personally went through a couple 4-week periods of not playing the game despite still believing it had a chance to get better. With every update, the community was hoping that this would be the one that would fix the spam, or the front foot fighting, or the running, or the broken punches, or damage and stamina, or the animations, or even the graphics. But what we received from the community's point of view was baby steps that made no significant changes or differences to the actual feel of the game. If anything, it felt like spammers got more powerful with the increase of tracking, making every button mash more successful. At this point, you couldn't go online without fighting a Sugar Ray Robinson body uppercut spammer with a few step back straights for good measure. Who wants to play that game? Makes a lot more sense as to why the player base was shrinking so quickly, especially since there was practically nothing else to do on the game. The AI, something that I imagine does take a lot of work and programming, isn't enough to make the offline experience fun, and there's no career mode. So if none of the 3 phases are worth playing or available, why boot up the game? At this point, things like arm fatigue and consolidating the head and body health to 2 bars instead of 6 were improvements, but they were small improvements that felt more like band-aids instead of a real fix. A little later on, we received the diagonal dodge, and even though this helped front foot fighting, it wasn't significant enough to make it viable or even fun. The baby steps toward the game that the player base really wanted slowly turned the community from patient supporters to irritated consumers. Roundtable after roundtable, we would hear things that we'd be excited about coming to the game just to see them executed in a way that made little to no difference. 90% of the roster fought the same. Some top fighters had overpowered stats that they didn't really have in real life that made them magnets for cheesers. Body uppercuts were still unblockable. Damage wasn't fixed. Stamina wasn't fixed. Online was broken. Front foot fighting was non-existent. Defense was non-existent. And at this point, it felt like we were hearing less and less from Steel City. Around this time, a lot of content creators and Discord community members started to ask the question that we all wanted answers to. I've seen this question more times than I can count over the past year, and I completely understand why. A lot of us have referenced the old ESBC videos when asking this question, which is ironic because I remember people being extremely critical even when these videos came out as well. Back in 2021, the game wasn't perfect and there were things that needed to be changed like punch animations, but I remember seeing these videos and being excited about the game we were going to get. Seeing the way the blocking was going to be based on physics, seeing the ability to slip punches while standing right in front of an opponent, seeing the ability to counter and stop an overly aggressive opponent, seeing the fighters that they had in the previews all have different punch and movement animations that reflected their real life counterparts, seeing the way the adrenaline mechanic was going to work, and even seeing the lifelike graphics made me look forward to getting my hands on this game. But the game we have now is not what I expected to receive. Defense is basically non-existent. Being overly aggressive isn't punished, but encouraged. Some of the fighter-specific movement and punch animations are either partially included or completely absent. Adrenaline only activates during rock, so it basically replicates Fight Night Champion, and even the graphics are not as good as they were in the past. Speaking of the graphics, we've been told that it's been the camera angle and some other reasons, but what are the other reasons? I may be completely off base here, but I don't think zooming in will turn this into what we had earlier on in the development process. But how did we get here? Why are so many things in the game looking different and even worse in some cases than they did in the alpha footage? We have heard things like the game having to be broken down and rebuilt a few times just to keep up with the growing expectations. To me, that would make sense as to why some features that were once polished are having to be redone, but are they going to be gone forever? From the perspective of someone playing the game and that knows nothing about the development, the lack of acknowledgement of people bringing certain features up like different animations and movement for players, to name a couple, that have been seemingly removed makes me believe that the development team has no interest of reworking any of these things. Or maybe they do and just don't know how long it will take, so they don't want to mention them so as not to put the pressure on these features being implemented. Whatever the case is, I don't know what's going on, and I'm guessing you don't either. And that's what makes everything so frustrating. To be fair, there are almost no gaming companies that continue to keep their player base updated on the things that they are doing in the development process. Steel City in the past has really been generous in this regard, but when you've trained your community to expect to hear from you regularly and then disappear without warning, frustration will grow and people will start to wonder, are they even listening to us? I completely understand that there will be times where updating us while saying that we're working on the same things could get monotonous, but I personally would like to hear updates even in small clips on things that we've asked to be in the game, like vulnerability or reworking some of the animations. At least something to keep us satisfied with what we will have in the future. The only problem is, when we hear something, we want to see it implemented properly. And as we know when speaking of this game, that hasn't always been the case. After a 3-month period of not posting any dev roundtables, the developers posted a short roundtable addressing what they've been doing and more of their plan for the game in the future. In this roundtable, they addressed the need to postpone career mode from their earlier projected fall release. To me, this wasn't surprising, but it was a little disappointing. But for the reasons they mentioned, which were it not being fully ready even for the beta, I was happy that they waited instead of pushing out something half-baked. But when we got the update, I was even happier that this wasn't the career mode update because the first version of the .6 update was completely broken. Online was really bad. The health and stamina changes weren't working properly, and the most important thing for a career mode, the AI, seemed to be bugged out to the point where it couldn't even fight at times. As you can imagine, the community was very upset. This is the most negative response I've seen to an update since they've come out with the game, and it even prompted me to make a video about this. People were completely losing faith in Steel City, and we weren't even sure what type of game we were going to get anymore. What was the game turning into? And with that update recently, can we even trust that the career mode we're supposed to be getting was going to be any good? These were all valid questions, and I think Steel City heard them, because after the response, they put out 2 hotfixes to the update that improved it substantially. I remember getting the first hotfix, playing the game, and being surprised that I was actually getting rocks and drops. With the hotfixes, you were finally able to conserve your stamina and punish a player that was just pressing buttons. Well, to an extent. The stamina cap, that I'm not sure if it's intentional or if it's a glitch, prevents players from completely gassing out. But even with that, if someone was playing completely careless, you can get them out of there with patience and timing. Online was still broken and desync was still a major issue, but for the first time since the first quarter of the year, I was having a lot of fun playing Undisputed. I have to give them credit for the hotfixes to the patch, because that to me felt like we could start to trust that the issues we are facing will be resolved. But how long would that take? Unfortunately, even after the hotfixes, the spammers and cheesers adapted to the new version of the game and found a way to make their spamming still more effective than actual boxing. I did say that there was improvements, but I would be lying if I said that the core issues of the game were fixed. Mashing and spamming are still more effective than boxing. With the stam cap, stamina is not completely fixed. Damage can still use some work. Tracking is still too high. The body uppercut still hits everything. The step back straight is still annoying, and the movement is still overpowered. Back in February, in no way did I think we would still be dealing with the same issues a year from early access becoming available, and the fact that we are is disappointing to say the least. To be fair to Steel City, they have been consistent in what they have been saying in the development of the game. Watching back all the roundtables, they essentially talk about how all of this is a process, and sometimes we may interpret things that they aren't actually saying, causing us to be disappointed when they don't reach our projections. But regardless of that, I feel that none of us, not even Steel City, thought that this would take this long for what feels like this little bit of progress. Has the game gotten worse? No. Objectively, this is a better game than what we had in January of last year, but the difference is definitely underwhelming. My friend that I mentioned earlier in the video still asks me from time to time if the game is worth the purchase, and I still haven't gotten to a point where I can honestly say yeah. There's too much flaws, too many exploits, and not enough features for me to recommend buying this game for someone who wasn't super invested in the entire journey. And to those on console that still haven't had a chance to play, I couldn't in good conscience recommend you build a gaming PC just for this game for the same reasons I just mentioned. This game still needs a lot of work and still has a ways to go before it's the game we all want and hope for. There was a period of time somewhere after the first ever preview of the gameplay where it became a kind of cool thing to call the game bad. No matter what Steel City put out, there was always those people in the comments fishing for likes that probably didn't even watch the video that showed up just to say that the game looked trash. I don't think I'll ever understand those types of people, but unfortunately, with the game falling short of expectations thus far, that crowd has grown to the point where a majority of the comments on this game from the people in the community are negative. But with all that being said, I still think Undisputed is a decent game. But it's a good game in the way that Lethal Company is a good game. What I mean by that is, it's clear that it isn't finished, and we are playing something that's still being cooked. But for what it is, it has things that we can appreciate and that make it fun. The way loose movement looks is very fluid. The characters for the most part look identical to their real life counterparts, and if played the way it was intended to be played, it can replicate the sport in a lot of instances. And despite the graphic quality being decreased from what we wanted, the game still looks phenomenal. And most of all, there are still ways to have fun with the game. I wouldn't recommend online, but there are still players out there that you can find in an online match and have fun playing against that won't spam or cheese you. Me personally, I've been having fun going through the welterweight division and trying to beat every fighter with George Davey. It's not super difficult, but the AI now is challenging enough to make it fun, and and you don't have to deal with body uppercut spammers and step back straight cheesers. If the game was fully released in its current state, I think we'd all be extremely disappointed. But the fact that it hasn't at least shows that Steel City understands that the game that they have now is not where it needs to be. I'm hoping that soon everything I said in this video becomes irrelevant. I really hope that today, on the anniversary of the game being released, Steel City puts out an update that fixes the game and turns it into what we've always wanted. And who knows, maybe they do. But in the more realistic future of this still being in the middle of a process with some growing pains involved, I hope we begin to receive more significant improvements. More improvements to the graphics so we can see the game that we once had. More fighter-specific animations. More improvements on the movement so people aren't just flying around the ring for 12 rounds. Maybe even a toggle option to let us make smaller steps more efficiently. More improvements to defense and punch tracking. An update on how the vulnerability system is coming along, and maybe even improvements to the hitboxes. And hopefully having Steel City make these improvements without them having the fear of tuning something too much so we aren't taking these small baby steps anymore. And I also hope going forward we get more communication as to what they are listening to and what they aren't listening to and why, just so we can temper our expectations accordingly. Today in society, people tend to label things and other people as trash before they even get a real chance to prove themselves. I mean, people are already trying to label Scoot Henderson a bust, and he just finished his first half of his first NBA season ever. People have no patience anymore, and because of that, if something doesn't reach their expectations as soon as they see it, they label it as garbage. And even if you are agreeing with this statement, I can guarantee that you are a part of that group and have done it somewhere in your life to something. I feel Undisputed's reputation has been a product of this thinking. In reality, this is a small studio that doesn't have the resources that a lot of other gaming studios have, nor do they have the experience, so they are pretty much guaranteed to make a lot more mistakes now and in the future. Trust me, I get it. I want it all in one night too. And we already have been waiting for this game for years, and now it's been playable for a full year and it's still not what we want. How much patience do we need to have? The answer? I don't know. In fact, I have no idea if this game will ever reach the expectations we have for it. Right now, it's fair to say that the game has been a disappointment, especially from what we thought we would get. But I don't think it's time to bury it yet. It still has potential, and to me, the developers have shown that they want to make a game that everyone enjoys. So, 1 year in, they didn't hit the mark, but it doesn't mean that they never will. Only time will tell if this game will crash and become a lesson for the next guys that want to take a crack at it, or if it will flourish and become the next classic boxing game. But whatever the case, I'm hoping that soon we all get what we really wanted, and this next year is way better than the last. And with that being said, I'm Incognito Gaming, and I'll potentially catch you in the next one.